And next up for named locations, we have Cave of the Berserkers. This cave is full of Chartland Berserkers, and if you haven't read into it, basically these guys are terrifying. They are just dudes that are running around with little clothes on. They're getting frostbitten, they're losing fingers and going numb and stuff. It's really creepy. But the thing about it is they're going insane from the Chartland, and they are also being chosen by O'Real to do these terrible things. Their cave is located 20 miles east of East Haven, and that is a really far trek for players to go, but it is down the river, so your players could, theoretically just follow it and not get lost. But, as we'll get to in a moment here, the hooks leading your players to Cave of the Berserkers are a little bit strange. So let's go ahead and dive right into that, shall we? So for the Tall Tales of 10 Towns, we have... Oh, wait a second. It's not here. Maybe we'll check in on the quest. Alright, let's go ahead and look. It's not there either. This was clearly an oversight, sadly, by the developers of this book, because as you can tell here, it states, here are some ways you can get your players to come here. And it says, a tale in the 10 Towns spurs the characters. Sadly, we don't get a quest, and we don't get a hook. So, realistically, if you're running it by the book, then the only hooks you would get to come here would be from taking a ring off of a random berserker out in the wilderness and encountering a Goliath werebear that says, hey, we need to go take these guys out. So we'll go into creating our own little rumor and our own little quest for this in a moment, but let's go ahead and take a look at this. If you are running random encounters, then one of the random encounters is you encounter a pack of Chartland Berserkers. These Chartland Berserkers are clearly insane, and they will fight to the bitter end, and they just don't care. And we'll look at their stat block in a moment here, but basically they're just, Berserkers, and they're just going to go crazy. Once your players hopefully defeat them all, they'll be able to look around, and if they're loot hungry, then they'll be able to see that one of them, presumably their leader, I guess, will have a ring on their finger. This ring is clearly, unique because, one, the other people don't have it, and two, it's a 6-pointed snowflake, which is the Frostmaiden symbol. So if your players are unfortunately inquisitive enough to find out what this is, when they take this thing off, it doesn't matter where they are. When this ring is taken off the finger, every humanoid within 100 feet of the ring is teleported right to the entrance of the Cave of the Berserkers. And that is really, really scary because it doesn't matter where you are in Icewind Dale. If this effect comes up and you just get teleported, if you are a more, hardcore DM, then you'll say, hey, you just got teleported and you have no idea where you are on this map. Which would be accurate because, unless they are able to somehow know exactly where they are in the world, all they would all be able to see is that they are just not where they were before and they're right next to a mountain. Which, as you can tell here, there's a lot of mountains. They could be theoretically anywhere. So if you're running a hardcore adventure, then for sure, they're just going to be out in the middle of nowhere, and it's going to be dark, so they can't see anything, really. And presumably, they'll be right in front of a cave, and maybe want to explore it. For the other incentive on coming here, we have your players meet a Goliath werebear, and whether this Goliath werebear be a totally random person, or they be King Gunvald Hrolgason, they will go ahead and prompt the players and say, hey, these guys are bad news, we need to go take them out. The thing about this, though, is, one, your players are probably going to have to be told, why they are evil and why they should be getting rid of. But two, why is there an incentive for the werebears to prompt the players to do this in the first place? Well, whether it be a random werebear or the king, they should have some type of escort that comes along with them. At least one NPC to join the party, hopefully a Goliath werebear to really bolster their numbers. Because you'll be able to see here, once we get into the named location, the barbarians there are incredibly difficult to take out. Some could say they're actually immortal. So before we get into the named location, let's go ahead and take a look at some tall tales we could spread about this place and some quests that could lead us there. Considering the Berserkers' lair on the east side of Icewind Dale, you can have either East Haven, Caer Dineval, or Caer Konig come up with a story about how, just recently some madman came into town and he was swinging his axe everywhere and it took 5 men to bring him down. And even when this person was captured, they refused to say anything and they're clearly gone mad, stir cold. You could tell that Oral's presence was in their eyes. You could have something in regards to that, and you can definitely spin the tale of how these guys are clearly insane and just want to, you know, fight and kill whoever they come across. Problem with that, though, is, of course, then how are you going to get your players to the Cave of the Berserkers? Well, you could have it where the person that has been captured has a ring on them, and maybe they just pop that ring off, and all of a sudden all the players just get bamped away anyway. Or you could take another spin on it. You could have it where the person that has been captured is somewhat coming to their senses. Maybe Oro's grip is loosening on them, and in a weird translucent state, the person mutters about a cave to the east of East Haven, down the river, and how terrible things are going on, and maybe they can be doing this while showing off their ravaged body, and their body hasn't only been ravaged by the cold, but also by weaponry, and it looks like they should have died. It looks like they've been stabbed, and it looks like they've been hacked to pieces, but still are alive. And maybe they can mutter something about the dark magic that lies within the Cave of the Berserkers. For a quest that could take us to the Cave of the Berserkers, we could have an alchemist that requires some scales from a white dragon. The only issue is, besides the main humongous dragon that's floating around the place, there is really only one other option, and that is in the form of two younger dragons that have been sighted east of East Haven. These two smallish white dragons have been prowling around the place and causing some damage and, of course, killing a lot of wildlife. And this alchemist friend is going to say, hey, you get me some scales of a white dragon and I'll make some potions of ice resistance. And that can prompt your players to the Cave of the Berserkers, but once they arrive there, they're going to see that the dragons are also working in tandem with these horrific beings. Hopefully that list there is good enough inspiration to get your players to the Cave of the Berserkers, but what do they do when they get there, and what are they going to see? Let's go ahead and dive right into all of that. For the story on this cave, we get some nice little info dump here. This cave was originally mined by dwarves, but they quickly gave up on it when it really didn't bear any fruit. These people here aren't just random berserkers. They were originally from the bear tribe, however they broke off when they found O'Reilly's excellent gaze. And the berserkers stole a couple of eggs a few years ago and hatched them here, and the two white dragons basically guard the place. So I alluded earlier that berserkers are really hard to kill in this cave, and why is that? Well, there is currently a brazier in here which emits a cold blue flame, and while that flame still persists, berserkers physically cannot die while inside the cave. So if your players are getting into fights around here, they're going to be in for a really tough time because they'll have people that are just going to stand there and laugh off pain and continue to fight. So let's go ahead and dive right into the named locations here so we can get a little idea of how your players will be able to tackle this location. Area 1, the Icy Path. This is the location that your players are going to arrive to, whether they walk here or they teleport here. They're going to be able to see this narrow way that leads up to Area 2, which is the gateway. But they'll also, if they look over to the side on the ravine, they'll be able to see a small hole that leads into the side of the cave. And thus it gives us two options on how to enter this cave. If your players walked here, then yeah, whatever, they're just going to see what's going on here. But if the players teleport here, I would strongly recommend that you basically give a nice little set piece on the location all around this cave, but also definitely make sure that they can see the cave entrance. Because if they just teleport out in the middle of nowhere, that's going to suck. But if they teleport to at least a place, then they're at least going to know, okay, there's a reason why we teleported here. In Area 2, we have the Bear's Head. And once again, look at this art. Fantastic. You can really sell the whole image of your players walking on this tight causeway and going into this weird mouth. And hopefully they don't think it's like some giant elemental that they're walking into. But mind you, when your players walk in here, they are not going to natively see those dragons perched up to the side. The dragons are going to be located inside. If the players generate enough noise outside, then they are going to go ahead and move in. One of them is going to come from the mouth of the cave, and then one of them is going to sneak in from behind and flank them. The wormlings do not pursue. They simply fend off whoever goes there, and if they run, then they're going to go ahead and post up outside and wait a couple of hours and then head back inside. So looking at the stat block of a white dragon wormling, they're only CR2. Hopefully when your players arrive here, they're at least level 3, if not 4, 5, or 6. And you might think to yourself, oh, CR2, it's not that bad. In fact, their bite, their normal attack, isn't even that bad. It's only a D10 plus a D4. That's nothing. They're 16 AC, not that big. 32 HP, practically nothing, but especially to a 5th level party. But what makes White Dragon Wyrmlings deadly is specifically that first round of combat, and hopefully not later on, because they exert a breath that does 5d8 cold damage, and it could hit multiple PCs. And mind you, normally one isn't that big of a deal, but if you have two dragons that flank at the same time and presumably breathe on the party, and in some cases multiple times, that's deadly. Even if you are level 5, taking 10 d8 points of damage, that can easily down you. It's only a DC 12 con save, which isn't that bad, but, you know, people roll bad sometimes, and not everyone's proficient in it. So always something to keep in mind that even though their stat block is relatively low, they have one powerful attack. And if the fight drags on for long enough for some reason, and you are lucky enough to roll a 5 or a 6 at the start of its turn, then these things are definitely going to go ahead and expunge their breath on everyone. And these things are going to go ahead and try and murder whoever is trying to murder them. Area 3, eggshells and cells. Once you players make their way inside, they'll be able to see that there's no light emitting around. So players that do not have dark vision are going to have to provide their own light. But as they look around, they'll be able to see that in the back here, in these alcoves, there are some cells. And what's interesting inside these cells is that there is cracked large eggshells. Anybody that succeeds on a DC 13 nature check will be able to determine that these were white dragon shells and they hatched about 3 years ago, meaning that there's some tiny little dragons floating around the place. If your players already got the prompt to come here to fight the dragons, then, you know, they're probably not going to be too surprised. But if your players did not arrive through that prompt and they just find some white dragon eggs, they might think to themselves, oh crap, there's some dragons running around here. Once again, any loud noise generated here is going to prompt one of the dragons to go ahead and move in through the area, coming from area 4, and another dragon is going to fly up and go around to area 2 and flank. Area 4, the waste chute, this is where we're going to get a lot of the info on the two dragons. The two dragons, Galley and Tizar, are totally evil, as all white dragons are, and they are totally going to defend themselves if anything arises, and they're going to work alongside the Charlatan Berserkers. We also get some nasty information on the waste chute itself and how a whole bunch of things are regularly thrown down the chute. If your players want to make their way up the chute from the outside, they're going to have to succeed on a DC 15 athletics check to climb up because it's so steep. If they don't have any climbing gear, of course. If they fail this check by 5 more, then they unceremoniously fall down into a pile of gore and grossness. The dragons have been doing a little bit of scouring for some loot because they have a nice little stockpile of stuff. They have 96 silver pieces, 331 copper pieces, a stitch leather wallet containing thieves' tools, a cracked spyglass for 250 gold, because mind you, spyglasses are one of the most expensive things ever. A single spyglass costs 1,000 gold, so a cracked one going for only a quarter of the price is still a ridiculous amount. And a spell scroll of knock, and my goodness, a spell scroll of knock is incredibly powerful at some point in this campaign. So we get information on how the two dragons operate. They flank enemies and they help each other out. They are predatory creatures. It makes sense that they would be able to work in tandem together. Even though they're not that intelligent, they are wise. But the thing is, we don't get any information on what they do if they are injured or if one of them is killed. Do they try and flee? Do they run away? We don't get any of that. So if you're a more vindictive DM, then I would say, yeah, they totally fight to the death, especially if one of them gets killed, then the other one's going to totally want revenge. Like I said, these creatures are not intelligent. They are more bestial, as white dragons are the more ferocious of all the dragons. So yeah, maybe just have them fight to the death. But if you are looking for more of a roleplay element, then maybe the dragons try and retreat if they take too much damage, live to fight another day. Maybe they run away from this and try and set up a lair somewhere else. And especially if one of the dragons is killed and another dragon runs away, then it's going to totally swear revenge on its sibling and try and get back at the party at some point in this adventure. That can obviously lead to a very awesome hook later on. Another thing to consider is that these dragons, they don't have anything listed in regards of who their parents are, but it does specifically state that the Charlatan Berserkers stole their eggs from the Ragged Glacier a couple years back. So the real question is, who are these two dragons' parents? Obviously, the most immediate thing that comes to mind is the fact that these could be the kids of Arveiaturace. So maybe there's some story to be told here about maybe your players interact with Arveiaturace and direct them to these dragons and say, hey, we found your kids, they got stolen by these people. Or maybe your players somehow knock out these dragons and bring these dragons all the way to Arveiaturace and try and garner some reward and say, hey, we saved your kids, kind of thing. there is certainly an amazing story to be told there. But mind you, trying to interact with dragons can be very dangerous. In Area 5, we have the Frostmaiden's Fire, and it is this magical fire which the Frostmaiden lit herself, which allows all of the Charlatan Berserkers in this cave to not die. These Berserkers, crazy as they may be, they do understand this property. They do understand that if they are inside of these caves, they cannot die. So if your players get into fights in the cave, one, the Berserkers are going to want to stay inside the caves, and two, they're going to want to defend the brazier. What's interesting though is they know for a fact they cannot die, but the thing is they don't feel this magic. What happens is if your players put out this brazier using a variety of spells such as Dispel Magic or Stone Shape, then the Charlatan Berserkers won't know this property unless they physically see someone else getting killed, you know, one of the other Charlatan Berserkers getting killed. So we get these two options of you can dispel the magic for an hour and it just, you know, goes away for an hour, or using Stone Shape to destroy the brazier. I'm willing to bet though the majority of groups don't have Dispel Magic or Stone Shape at hand. So how are your players going to deal with this brazier if they don't have these specific spells? I would certainly recommend that you allow for something here. Maybe not just brute forcing it, because, you know, that would kind of just be lame of just, oh, I hit it and it's gone. Maybe you do something in regards of maybe they have to perform some sort of ritual in front of it and dispel this magic. Maybe you could say that throwing one of the Charlatan Berserkers into the fire causes them to, you know, wither away on the inside and kills them, and that can provide a way for your players to kill the Charlatan Berserkers while still having the magical fire. Maybe you could have it where the base of the pillar is broken, but the fire still persists, and if the players take this fire outside of the cave, then it no longer has these properties. But of course, trying to transport this heavy thing is going to require maybe at least 2 people, and while they're carrying this thing, they get ambushed by these Charlatan Berserkers. Definitely shake things up here, because trying to fight the Charlatan Berserkers in here is next to impossible for some groups, and it's also next to impossible for most groups to try and put out the magical fire. In Area 6, we have the Slaughterhouse, and you'll never guess what happens here. Just recently, the Charlatan Berserkers lured in an owlbear into this cave and fought the thing, and I'm sure the owlbear was totally confused that these people weren't dying. But needless to say, a horde of guys that can't be killed just hacking away at this thing, mechanically the owlbear is going to lose at some point. And it did, and now there's currently 1 Charlatan Berserker hacking it up and presumably saving it for later eating. As written, this is going to be the first Charlatan Berserker your players can come across, and this is where your players are going to have the starting realization of they cannot die. And I'm going to say, you really need to make that apparent. You need to be very transparent in regards of, oh yeah, they're taking all this damage, and then all of a sudden, you know, oh, that would have killed any other mortal being. You stab him through his heart, you know, cut into his flank, part of his neck's exposed. You make it purely obvious that this guy should be dead, but isn't. But at the same time, you should also make it apparent that this guy isn't undead either. You should make it seem like, oh, he is just crazy. He's just a crazy person and can't die. Maybe you allude to the fact that the fire is the reason for that. Maybe whenever someone is about to die, maybe a blue flame kind of erupts from their wound and seals it up for a moment. Maybe whenever someone's about to die, blue flames shoot out of their eyes and you can see the visage of Oriel coming out and saying something in regards of my chosen cannot die. Make it transparent, because Charlatan Berserkers by themselves are already tough. They have a pretty decent sized health pool, but what's scary about them is the fact that they attack with advantage all the time because they don't care. They have a huge health pool, and most important of all, they know for a fact that they can't die. Why would they care about being cautious? They're going to recklessly attack every single turn. And most important of all, they're recklessly attacking. They're getting advantage on all of their attack rolls, and they attack 3 times. So 3 attacks with that Charlatan Flail there, that's more than likely going to at least hit 1 time, if not more, if they're not AC junkies. And every time they get hit, the player must make a DC 13 Constitution saving throw or be poisoned. Being poisoned really sucks, because if you have disadvantage on all your stuff, that's miserable. That being said though, because the Charlatan Berserkers are always going to recklessly attack, that means all attack rolls against them have advantage. What is a very cool trait about these Charlatan Berserkers though, is that at the start of every one of your turns, you roll a d6, and on a 1, the Berserker kind of turns to the side and screams out something to just an invisible force. kind of think of like Darkest Dungeon, the Prophet or whatever. And they're going to waste their whole turn, which is really good because, like I said, these guys on their turns, they're pumping out a decent amount of damage. And most important of all, they don't care. They can't die. So how are your players going to handle dealing with one person that just can't die and is just going to constantly attack and attack and attack? Well, hopefully your players remember that there's more than just attacking in this world, and hopefully people brought some spells along that aren't just all about doing damage. You can do such things as disarm the person, you can try and time the person up, you can put them to sleep, you can shove them in a corner and grapple them. There is a lot of mechanics which can prevent enemies from attacking you, and hopefully you either one, express this to your players, or hopefully they just remember all these mechanics. But it doesn't really matter how they handle it, it just matters if they are able to handle it. In Area 7, we have meat storage, and it currently states that there's 80 pounds worth of fresh meat in there, and each pound goes for 5 silver per pound back at town, which is not bad at all. If you have people that are not caring too much and are able to bring this stuff back home, then yeah, they can make a tiny little profit here. But if you're running a hardcore game where they aren't able to carry too much, then this isn't going to be any much use at all, really. In Area 8, we have the living quarters, and the living quarters is probably going to press into your players that, oh hey, there's more than just one person that lives here. So if they come in here and see this, they're going to be thinking to themselves, oh crap, you know, there's people living here, if they haven't already interacted with the Charlatan Berserker. But if they have already interacted with the Charlatan Berserker, then they're going to be like, man, we just had a tough time dealing with one guy, how are we going to handle, you know, a couple more? And unfortunately, that is what happens once the players decided to leave the cave, or preparing to leave the cave. Then 3 Charlatan Berserkers are going to show up. So an unfortunate thing that happens in a lot of these quests, we'll see in both chapters 1 and 2, is the fact that there is this constant thing of, as your players are about to leave, then all of a sudden someone appears. That happens at the, like, on top of my head, that happens at least 5 times. So I would recommend toning that down, especially if they keep getting these same quests that all have this theme of people returning just at the right time. Because 1, that gets real old real quick, and 2, most important of all, it is deadly. Your players are, even at like 4th or 5th level, they might have a hard time dealing with a Charlatan Berserker, but dealing with 3 at a time, that's terrifying. That is 9 attacks at advantage every single round coming out. And if your players have not dealt with the brazier, then that's 9 attacks that are never going to stop because they can't die. Unless, of course, your players start disarming them, or if they put them to sleep, or if they, you know, paralyze them, etc., etc. It states here that your players are going to meet the Berserkers on the causeway here in Area 1, but the Berserkers know that their magic doesn't influence outside of it, so they're going to want to fight their way into the cave and to make sure that they cannot die. Which makes sense. I mean, of course, if you knew you had a magical ability where you couldn't die somewhere, of course you're going to try and fight someone there. So if your players know for a fact that they cannot die while they're in this cave, then of course your players are probably not going to be dumb enough to pursue them while they're in there. But if they had not caught on to the fact that the Berserkers cannot die while inside there, then maybe it does unfortunately come to blows and your players go inside and fight 3 Berserkers at a time and get into this terrible scuffle. But on the same token, of course, if your players see that these Charlatan Berserkers essentially fight their way past the party and just run into the cave, then hopefully your players are going to be like, nah, screw that, we're out of here, and bounce. The Cave of the Berserkers is, once again, a more shallow dungeon delve here, but it is absolutely terrifying because they can go up against people that can't die, and dragons, which theoretically can be pumping out 10d8 points of damage on the first round of combat. So this is definitely not one of those areas that you want to introduce early on because, you know, these big whole health pools and lots of damage and lots of attacks that they're pouring out is absolutely terrifying and will wreck low-level parties. Would not recommend this place for anywhere below level 5 at the bare minimum. And once again, this comes down to how you're willing to play it up. If the brazier is only able to be destroyed using a stone shape, then unfortunately most groups are not going to have a way to deal with that brazier, and thus the Charlatan Berserkers are going to forever be invincible. But if your players were given the quest to kill these Charlatan Berserkers, then they're going to have to figure out some way to do it. And honestly, the only real way to do it is to lure them out into the wilderness, or at least wait for them out in the wilderness, and attack them there. That is where this map is not going to suffice. You're going to have to use a wilderness map, and your players are probably going to think to themselves, okay, we can't kill them in there. We're going to have to wait till they go out for some hunting expedition, and we'll, gank them then. I'm sure your players are going to get very creative on how they try and handle foes that cannot be killed, and hopefully they are creative enough, and more importantly, successful enough to actually deal with it. Now, harkening back all the way to the beginning, what happens if your players teleport here? If they teleport here, they're going to look around and say like, oh, there's a cave, let's go ahead and check it out, I guess, because we're here for a reason. Then they're going to be in here and fight some enemies that can't be killed and go up against some dragons that are going to pump out a ton of damage. But the thing is, how are they going to know where they are? If, once again, you are a gracious DM and you're just playing on the map and you tell them where they are on the map, then, go figure whatever. But if you want to play it up more hardcore, then you're going to have to say, hey, you have no idea where you are, you're going to have to start looking around. At which case, you'll probably want to prompt them to make a survival check of some degree as they travel around. And hopefully, if they roll high enough, they can discover that, oh, hey, there's a river. And if we just follow this river, we're bound to get to one of the lakes. And if we get to one of the lakes, we can definitely get to one of the towns. The Cave of the Berserkers is, not exactly my favorite. I do like the idea of these Chartreland Berserkers. I like them being insane, and I like them attacking a lot, and them just not caring about getting hurt. But I really don't like the idea of there's only one way to prevent them from dying, or I guess technically two ways. They can dispel the magic, but that only lasts an hour. So I would recommend, changing it up, allow for more interactions with the brazier, and once again, play up the fact that these guys cannot be killed, specifically when they're being stabbed and gutted and stuff. Make it perfectly clear that these guys should be dying, but are not dying. But once again, don't play them up like undead either. Not really much more to say other than, unfortunately Wizards forgot a little bit about this quest in regards of the Tall Tales, and maybe not all of your groups will be down for this tiny little trek into a tiny dungeon. And look at that, we are already almost halfway done with Chapter 2. We are now on to the Dark Duchess. The Dark Duchess was a pirate ship that unfortunately crashed in the Sea of Moving Ice. The crew is no longer there, they are all dead, and this actually ties into one of the book's secrets. This pirate crew was traipsing all about and unfortunately crashed in the Sea of Moving Ice. And what was really unfortunate for them was they probably were not prepared for the frigid north, and most important of all, they were very far away. They were in fact 20 miles away from the nearest town, and that's only if they actually knew where all the towns were. If the crew didn't actually know, then for all they know, they could have been, 100 miles away from civilization. They had no clue. But if one of your characters has the cannibal pirate secret, then they themselves were part of this very crew and crashed and made their way through harrowing blizzards all across the tundras, and by the end of it all, were the only person left alive from the crew to make it to civilization. So if one of your players has a secret, that is an awesome tie-in to the Dark Duchess, and more so, the rumors and quests that we get to this place are also very neat as well. For the tall tale of this location, we get a little prompt that says, head northwest out of Bremen and you'll see a pirate ship frozen in the ice less than a quarter of a mile away from shore. No one's sure where it came from, but it's not going anywhere so long as the dark winter lasts. I bet its hold is full of treasure. So if you have players that are really, treasure happy, then for sure they're going to hop on a pirate ship. That sounds awesome. For the quest, though, we also get a very good tie-in. The tavern keepers of the 5 Tavern Center in Bremen are running low on supplies because presumably, supplies are not flowing through because of this horrible winter. And your players are going to be prompted to head over to the Dark Duchess because, hey, we know there's a pirate ship over there, and pirates love rum, ergo there must be rum on that ship, right? The tavern keepers are willing to pay a pretty handsome price for some of that rum. They are offering to pay a fair price plus 150 GP incentive. So pretty good deal there. Your players go in there and presumably get some pirate booty as well as get some rum and have a great payout in the end. Unfortunately, once your players actually arrive, they will discover that there is no rum to be had. And I promise you, there is going to be no end to the memes of, but why is all the rum gone? So right there, we've got already 3 prompts to get your players to the Dark Duchess. We've got the secret, which can say, hey, one of you is actually from the Dark Duchess, and you may want to go ahead and see what happened to the captain and to the ship. 2, hey, it's a pirate ship and it's filled with loot. Go ahead and go find out what it is. And 3, get some rum because we need rum because reasons. But I propose to you another way your players could find out about the Dark Duchess. While some of these secrets might not be used, and specifically the Pirate Cannibal one might not be used, I would recommend that if no one has that secret, then maybe one of the NPCs the players know and love has that secret. Maybe one of the NPCs will turn the players out to the side and be like, you know, don't judge me, but, you know, I was part of this pirate crew, and we had to make our way over here, and I was the last one alive, and I had to eat people to survive. And there is some good loot on that ship. Maybe you can go find out what's on there and go see what happened to my captain, because my captain stayed along with the ship. So having an NPC, someone the players actually know and love, prompt them to go over there could be a good incentive. And also maybe this NPC actually joins them on their quest to the Dark Duchess. And especially having the NPC join along with them can be a great way for the players to actually find the place, because it is very vague of saying, oh, hey, head northwest of Bremen, because, you know, there's a lot of northwest area around there. You know, it could be in a lot of places. Another thing you can do here is if your players have already dealt with Sefik Caltro, then maybe Sefik has some tie-in to the Dark Duchess as well. It states in the book that Sefik Caltro died a long time ago and his spirit was inhabited by a druid spirit. But maybe instead of him being a sailor, he could have been a pirate. And that pirate was part of the crew of the Dark Duchess. And that could be a really good tie-in if one of your players has the secret of Pirate Cannibal, because they could be scratching their head saying like, oh man, one of my crew was a dude and he all of a sudden turned into a murderer. I wonder what happened to the captain. So already some really great prompts to get your players to the Dark Duchess. So what happens when your players trek all the way there and finally see the Dark Duchess? They're going to see that the Dark Duchess is hundreds of yards from shore, and it is trapped in thick ice. The thing is, though, is if you're going purely by the book, and by specifically the map here, you can see that there is actually no clear way to get over there, because the Sea of Moving Ice still has some water flow in it. So if you are running it purely as, you know, intended by the map, then there actually is no way to walk over there. But it doesn't actually specifically say anything about approaching the ship. It just does say that they can get to it no problem. So if you want your game to be a little bit more adventurous, then you could say, oh, you know, you're going to have to figure out some way to go over the ice. And maybe you could bust out the fact that they need to bring a boat along with them. Or the fact that maybe they have to play a fun little mini game where they have to get on a block of ice and paddle that thing over, or hop from ice block to ice block. Regardless of how your players arrive to the ship, they're going to find that as soon as they approach the ship, they're going to be hearing loud guttural snarls from some creature, and the ship is definitely not abandoned. And the reason for that is because there is an ice troll aboard. So let's go ahead and dive right into the map and see what we're working with here. And here we are, the Dark Duchess. So immediately once you start to look at this map, you're going to see, one, the fact that there is in fact an ice troll here, and ice trolls are incredibly dangerous. We'll be getting to that stat block in a moment. 2, there's some kobolds here, which the troll is trying to get to. 3, there's a goat here for some reason. But 4, there is a small treasure hoard. And you might be thinking to yourself, man, that might be the pirates' treasure hoard, right? Unfortunately, no. It is in fact a dragon's hoard. And the reason for that is because this area is now being currently made into a semi-lair of Arveiaturace. And that is going to be an incredibly deadly encounter. So as your players climb their way onto the ship, they'll be able to hear, you know, snarling and ripping and tearing. And your players may or may not be able to clue in on the fact that it's a troll. But your players are probably going to want to be stealthy about it, because trolls are incredibly dangerous. Ice trolls even more so. So normal trolls, all they do is just stand there and whack at you and, you know, regenerate some HP and all that. Nothing too major. Ice trolls, however, are way worse. While ice trolls are alive, they generate a 10-foot aura of bitter cold around them. And at the start of the troll's turn, all non-magical flames in the area are extinguished, and any creature that starts to turn within 10 feet takes an automatic 3d6 points of damage. Meaning that if you've only got, you know, 20, 30 some odd health, this thing's already whacking into you super hardcore, and that's not even its normal attacks. And then even more so, in addition to that, this thing's pumping out 3 attacks a turn, 1 bite, which does a tremendous amount of damage, 1d6 plus 4, and 2d8 cold damage, but also the claws. It's attacking twice the claws, and the claws do measly 2d6 plus 4 damage, 2d8 cold damage, and the players must have to make a DC 15 Constitution saving throw or have disadvantage on attack rolls until the end of its next turn. So this thing is destructive. This thing's pumping out a bejesus ton of damage. It is shutting down people because presumably a lot of people are going to want to stay away from this thing. And this thing also is making people lose their attacks essentially because they're having disadvantage on their attacks. Huge deal. This creature will easily trounce a level 4 party and probably do a pretty decent job against a level 5 party too. This thing is gross. So hopefully if your players hear this loud noise coming from inside, they're going to either 1, just run away from this thing, or 2, they're going to go ahead and stealth on board and see what's up. The stealthing isn't too hard, only a DC 12 stealth check in order to not make your presence known. Nothing too major. If your players fail on this check, then the troll is going to stop what it's doing and chase after the players because presumably that is an easier meal to get to. So this map, as you might notice, is laid out a little bit finicky. We have areas 1 in the middle of the ship, but then areas 2 and 3 on top of the ship. So as we can see here, the whole rigging and mast of the ship are covered in a layer of ice. From the waterline of the vessel, it's a 10-foot climb to get to the main deck. The sides of the hull are slippery and can't be climbed without using magic or climbing gear. So the important thing to remember is that Area 1 is located on the left and middle ship here. They probably should have shown 2 different areas as Area 1, but that might have confused people as well. But just remember that Area 8, for example, is below Area 3, and Areas 4 through 7 here are located underneath Area 2. As your players hop board on ship, they're going to be able to see that there is in fact a large hole that's been gouged out on the main deck. If a DC 12 survival check, they can surmise that a single enormous creature is the one that did all this damage. And they probably will think to themselves, if they're hearing this noise, that whoever's creating the noise is the creature that did this. But they are wrong, because if the check succeeds by 5 or more, the characters can confirm that this was made by dragon's claws. So if they know for a fact that there was dragon claws that did this, and they kind of poke their head down and see there's a troll, then they're going to be thinking to themselves, oh, is this going to be a bigger fish moment? Oh no. We also see here that unfortunately a lot of ice has built up onto the captain's quarters here into Area 8. And your players are going to have to spend a full hour trying to chip away at the ice in order to make their way to open the door. The only issue is, if they spend a full hour chipping away at the ice, the troll is going to hear this. It states here that the time is lowered for every person that helps, and if you use fire to thaw out the ice, it melts away twice as quickly, and also doesn't attract the troll. But the thing is, I'm willing to bet that people are not going to settle down and just do something that takes a long time if they hear a loud noise coming from underneath. So you can probably not have to worry about that too much, but take into consideration, if it takes an hour and there's 1 person doing it, then if 2 people do it, then it's 30 minutes. Then if 3 people do it, then it's, 15 minutes or whatever. In Area 2, we have the Forecastle, and this is where, if your players are observant enough, they're going to be able to see the reason for all these claw marks around, and it's because when Arveiaturace hops on board, she exerts all of her weight onto the front here, and there's a whole bunch of boards cracking, and there's some claw marks on it. In Area 3, we have the Aftcastle. We get a nice 2 whole sentences. Ice coats the captain's wheel. There's nothing else of interest here. Okay. At least put something interesting here. Maybe there's like a little bobblehead that someone uses at the, the steering mast. Maybe there's like a hanging amulet or something. Maybe they worshiped some type of sea goddess and, there's that little nice pair of fuzzy dice or whatever the heck. Maybe do something here to at least give this place a little character. Pirate ships deserve character because pirates should be interesting. That's all I'm saying. In Area 4, we have the Surgeon's Cabin, and if your players search around in this little area long enough, they'll be able to find the following: 3 vials of antitoxin, a healer's kit, and a vial of holy water. Vial of holy water, good against undead. The antitoxin, great if there's, toxin in your game. The healer's kit, good if you use that variant rule, or if you have someone with that feat. So, just a nice little haul of loot there. In Area 5, the First Mate's Cabin. The frost-covered bed is shoved into one corner of the wooden staircase. The rest of the cabin is empty. Once again, make this place feel interesting. Make it feel real. Make it feel lived in. Make it feel like the first mate, whoever they were, had some type of flourish in character. Maybe they carved something into the side. Maybe there's a little journal to be found somewhere. Heck, maybe there's even an eye patch hanging around in here somewhere. Who knows? Just give it a piratey character and a piratey theme. In Area 6, we have the chart room. And it's here where your players can find a 6-foot wide, 6-foot tall map of the Sword Coast and a map of Icewind Dale stored in a map case that lies on the floor. With a thorough search of the room, they can also find some navigator's tools. So the question is, if they had a map of Icewind Dale, why didn't they just take the map to try and, better navigate all the way back to Icewind Dale? Maybe you should say it got kind of like lodged in somewhere, or maybe it kind of got buried under a whole bunch of rubble or something. Make it seem like this thing wasn't easily accessible, because it's more than likely that the crew would have taken it. And especially if one of your characters is in fact from this ship, then there should be some explanation as to why they didn't grab these maps and these navigation tools. One cool thing you could do is maybe have the map of Icewind Dale hidden underneath the map of the Sword Coast, and once your players reveal it, they can see that there's certain places circled, or maybe some notes or names written on the side here which can prompt your players into future adventure. In Area 7 we have the storage, and it states here that there was more things in here, but some of the crew took it when they abandoned ship. But your players will still be able to find the following. They'll be able to find some hood lanterns, some flasks of oil, some bars of soap. Always got to remember soap, because always make your players roll hygiene checks. 3 sets of manacles and 10 torches. So for the people that are blind, this is really good, because, people need light. In Area 8, we have the captain's cabin, and it's here where your players will actually find the captain himself. Sadly, he died. He heard that there was a dragon up basically all around the ship, and he didn't want to deal with it, and he just sat in here and he drank all the rum, and that is in fact why all the rum is gone. You should totally play that up like he's looking like Pirates of the Caribbean style, just dead. And a whole bunch of rum bottles scattered all over the place. What's really cool here, and a mechanic that I probably want to see more often in the future, is we get the captain's journal, and it states here that the journal shows off the exploits of the Dark Duchess and the captain. And what's really cool here is it states that if your players accept the challenge, they can go ahead and tell some of the exploits, and just by pure improv, and you can award your players inspiration for it. I like that idea of, that's shared world building, and I like that kind of stuff, where as long as it's not too over the top and you have a group that you can trust with it, then go ahead and let them basically create this world together and share in the exploits of this captain that they don't even know. But if you do have someone from this ship, then they can be the ones to chime in on the exploits, and you can ask them, oh hey, what did you and your crew do? And hopefully your player would have already had something in mind if they were already from the ship. In the corner, your players can find a frozen chest, which they can either thaw out or chip off all the ice. And inside of this chest, your players can find a decent amount of gold. 150 gold, 520 silver, gold bracelet, and a bag of tricks. And the bag of tricks is also really cool because this is the second bag of tricks your players could potentially get throughout this campaign. And bag of tricks are just fun because you can take a little item and throw it out, and all of a sudden it becomes a cool little animal companion for a little bit of time. A really nice reward for not that much hard work, but it probably will be a lot of hard work because one, they have to get here in the first place, and that's going to take a tremendous amount of time. And two, they are potentially going to have to go up against an ice troll and potentially even a dragon. Area 9 of the hold. Unless your players did something to draw the troll away, either on accident or on purpose, they're going to find the troll here, and it's going to be banging on the walls and the door, trying to get into Area 12 to try and eat some of the kobolds. When your players look around, they'll also be able to see a veritable treasure hoard. And hopefully, if they were smart enough to get the prompt that there was a dragon aboard, and they see a dragon's little hoard there, they can hopefully think to themselves, oh hey, there's a dragon, maybe we should stay, or maybe we should leave. What's really cool is the dragon actually has a trophy here next to all of the gold, and it's a crag cat that's been frozen solid and basically propped it up next to all the gold, which is, a really cool, frozen trophy. So when white dragons bury their treasure, they freeze it all over, and the dragon is currently freezing over in layers. And as your players reveal all of the ice, either by chipping away at it or by thawing it out, they'll be able to get to each layer, but each of these layers is going to take an hour to get through. So in the first layer, we get a ton of gold. On the second layer, we get some gold, some art, and some spell scrolls. On the third layer, we get more gold and some magic items in regards of a drift globe and a quiver of a Luna. And on the fourth layer, they can find a whole bunch of magic armor and what appears to be a wand of Orcus, which if you have some super duper nerds in your group and they know what the wand of Orcus is, and you tell them, oh hey, it's a staff and there's, you know, a skull at the end of it and there's green light coming out of the skull, then people are going to be like, no, that's impossible, it can't be the wand of Orcus. And they'll be right, because it is a replica, it is a fake. But still, you can totally goad some of those super nerds on, and that's hilarious. We don't get any information here on how the troll actually operates, but the troll would probably just simply run up and try and attack someone. But how does the troll run up and attack someone? Well, that depends on where they are. If your players are up top on deck and they look down and they decide to shoot at this thing or just create noise or whatever, it's either going to have two options. It either squeezes through the staircase and makes its way to the main deck, or it just climbs up through the large open hole. If it climbs through the little staircase there, then you should totally rule that it's squeezing through because it's so big. And if it decides to jump up and climb, then of course you take into effect that it's going to be spending its action climbing its way up. So hopefully a single round is enough to hopefully give your players an edge. But I'm going to tell you once again, if your players are not prepared to fight this thing, if they're not throwing everything they have at this creature, they're going to be in for a bad time. I'd probably say level 4 groups get TBK'd by this thing. Level 5 groups have a bit of a harder time. Maybe level 6 groups actually can get through this fight a little bit okay, and so on and so forth. So hopefully your players have fire and acid spells prepared and are totally ready to burn this sucker. And once again, this is another reason why your players should explore around a little bit more. They could find those flasks of oil, throw the oil on the troll, and set that thing ablaze. And then it permanently cannot regenerate during the fight, unless it spends its full action to set out a fire, in which case you gained a benefit as well, because instead of attacking you, it instead is patting out its flames. So creative players can definitely get through this fight okay. In Area 10, we have the Galley, and what's really cute here is your players can find a little goat. This goat is actually being used by the kobolds of this ship, and mind you, I'll get to the kobolds in a moment, but the kobolds essentially, you know, worship the dragon. But the kobolds keep the goat here because they don't want it to be eaten by the dragon. The kobolds just use the goat as a pack meal, essentially. In Area 11, we have the Rum Storage, and this is what your players may have been prompted to come here for. And sadly, they'll be able to see that there is no more rum. Some of the planks here are partially destroyed, and if people take the time to reassemble these things like a puzzle, they'll be able to see a symbol, which is essentially a drow who wears a eye patch and a purple wide-brimmed hat, accented with a colorful feather plume. In Elvish script, around the circumference reads, "The best rum from your friends at One-Eyed Jack's." Once again, this joke is going to go over the heads of newer players to D&D, but for the super nerds, this is a reference to Jarlaxle Baneray, who is one of the most infamous drow all around. A roguish individual who is totally not that super evil. He did turn away from all of the drow in the Underdark, but he still gets up to no good from time to time. In Area 12, we have the water storage because party in the front and business in the back at this time, I guess. Basically, there is several kobolds here who are locked away in this room because they're terrified of this troll, and they're all just, you know, huddling in here praying that this troll doesn't get in there. And what's really cute is your players deal with the troll, and if your players actually get through the door, then the kobolds are going to go ahead and hurl their javelins. But the fun fact about their javelins is they have a +0 to attack, and most important of all, they have minus to damage, meaning that even if they somehow hit someone with a +0 to attack, they deal on average only 1 point of damage, which is pretty cute, honestly. After the kobolds hurl their javelins, you should totally make it apparent that these kobolds are absolutely no threat at all. And then as soon as they throw their javelins, they go ahead and cower and beg and say, "Oh, we're sorry, we're sorry." If your players go ahead and interrogate the kobolds, they'll be able to say that they worship Arveiaturace and they don't know when Arveiaturace is going to show up. For those of you that haven't looked into the Wilderness Encounters, Arveiaturace is an ancient white dragon who roams around Icewind Dale, and she is an incredibly formidable foe because she is an ancient white dragon. What's interesting about her is the fact that she currently has a saddle on her back, and that saddle has a dead guy in it. She used to pal around with this wizard, but the thing is, this wizard died a long time ago, and Arveiaturace hasn't actually accepted the fact that he's died. So during combat and whatever roleplay encounter you get into with Arveiaturace, she is going to go ahead and talk to Maltharon, the dead guy on her back. It states here that for every hour your players spend on the ship, there is a 20% chance that Arveiaturace appears, meaning that you either roll a 1d100 and it's 1 to 20, or you roll a d20 and it's a 1 through 4. The thing that makes Arveiaturace interesting is not only the fact that she seems to be somewhat crazy and has a dead guy on her back, but also the fact that she is going blind. She has cataracts, and she can only see to a range of 60 feet away. If your players are inside of the ship and Arveiaturace appears, then she'll go ahead and announce, "I smell warm flesh here," and that's totally going to freak out the party. But if the players are topside on the ship when she appears, then she's just going to go ahead and dive right in for the attack. If your players are sneaky enough, though, they can get away with this, and Arveiaturace will go ahead and just fly off somewhere and eat a walrus. The only issue is, trying to outsneak a dragon is a pretty tough deal. So this dragon has a passive perception of 23. So if your players do hear these large wings begin to beat, then maybe your players go ahead and try and stealth, and you roll like a group stealth check to some degree. But the thing is 23 is pretty hard to beat. In fact, for some people, it's impossible. And, you know, it's more than likely going to possibly come to blows. If your players are bold enough to try and steal from her hoard, and she notices this, she is just going to go ahead and search all up high and low, and she's willing to break through the walls, trying to find whoever stole from this stuff. And the players are probably going to get found out real quick. The thing about this dragon is, if your players are regular level for this campaign, they are not going to be able to handle an ancient white dragon. She is way too strong. Probably a breath attack is probably going to be enough to just kill most players, if not just, you know, down them outright, I guess. But she is just going to be able to have a field day with them. So you should really transform this not into any combat encounter, because she is just going to murder everyone. You should turn this into more of a roleplay encounter. As she's prowling around the ship, she's going to be constantly talking to this guy on her back. And if your players don't see this, they're basically going to just hear this dragon go, "Oh, hey, Maltharon, ready your spells." But then, you know, so they're probably going to be freaked out even more. Like, oh, it's a dragon and a wizard? Oh, crap. But if your players sneak a peek and are able to see that, in fact, the person on her back is dead, they can use that to their advantage. And of course, you can use some of these suggestions here. If you think that the worst is going to happen, you can say that as Arveiaturace is searching around, then Maltharon falls off of the saddle, and then the dragon's going to say, "Oh, hey, can you guys help me?" And maybe that'll be a prompt for your players to go out and be like, "Oh, hey, we'll help you, but, you know, just don't kill us." And your players can do the really macabre thing of taking a dead body and putting it back on a dragon's saddle. Players can also use this to their exploit. If they see that the dragon is super busy trying to get this person on her back, then maybe at that point they just decide to run. At which point they're lucky because Arveiaturace is too preoccupied trying to get Maltharon on her back. It states here that the dragon is totally lying if anybody tries to help put Maltharon on her back, and she'll just go ahead and attack once the job is done. I would recommend that you either, one, change that, or two, maybe make it when your players put the dead person on their saddle, maybe have some type of expositional thing drop from Maltharon, maybe like a note of some degree, maybe some type of magical item to some degree, and let this thing, you know, this item of Maltharon's, or this note from Maltharon's, or maybe even like some piece of clothing from Maltharon, be a way for your players to hold it up and be like, "Hey, hey, hey, back off, lady," and to try and get away from this dragon. Another recommendation we get from the book to get away from the dragon is, as your players are, you know, getting cornered by this thing, then all of a sudden a Verbeeg shows up and tries to save the day. Another suggestion we get for your players to get out of the dragon's way is by having a Verbeeg show up and save the day. Thankfully, this Verbeeg is not like the Verbeeg from Goodmead and is going to attack the party. No, this Verbeeg is in fact going to help the party out. This Verbeeg named Tinjong, she is a worshipper of Sylvanas, which actually also ties back into the location in Goodmead. And she is actually going to go ahead and cast a Fog Cloud to try and blind the dragon and hopefully get the players away. What's cool here is, you know, your players get saved by this Verbeeg, and maybe they've already had a combat encounter with a Verbeeg, and this will, you know, hopefully change their perspective on all monsters. And they'll be able to meet up with Tinjong, and Tinjong will say, hey, I want to end Oriel's winter, maybe I can help you guys out. And you can actually have a very big companion along your journeys all around Icewind Dale. That is really cool stuff. Mind you though, having a powerful NPC alongside the party usually does suck, especially if the NPC overshadows the party. So maybe not make it a permanent NPC, or maybe even tone down this Verbeeg in particular, because, you know, that's just not fun to always be overshadowed by some NPC. What's also nice here is when Tinjong brings the party back to her cave, there is a Chwinga inside. And if your players make some music alongside this Chwinga, the Chwinga is going to give them a supernatural gift. Aw, awesome. I like the Dark Duchess. I love pirate stuff. The ship is awesome. There's some cool tie-ins to this, and specifically it can be a personal tie-in for one of the players to come back here. But I will say the ice troll can be really difficult if your players are lower level and they aren't created enough to put this thing on fire. And of course, having a dragon show up and ruin their day is a lot of fun, especially if they can get away with it. And that can be a really fun, you know, encounter of your players are trying to thaw away out all this gold and try and steal from a dragon before the dragon shows up. But when the dragon does show up, the dragon's going to be more and more pissed the more loot has been stolen. You know, that's really cool. And then of course, your players being able to get away from this caper is a really awesome feeling. But if you are more vindictive DM, then unfortunately this is going to be an easy TPK because a dragon, specifically an ancient dragon, is going to mop the floor with everybody, for sure. The lead-ins to this place are great. The little encounters you can have with this place are awesome. You know, the journal of the captain, that can be a fun roleplay, world-building scenario where you guys talk about the world and what this captain did. The gold and also, more importantly, all the loot you can get from the dragon's hoard, awesome stuff. And of course, being able to say that you got away from a dragon is fantastic and is in fact one of the prompts to give your players a level up. So really not much more to say other than, you know, I really like this place and I can't wait to dive into more of the areas around here.